maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but vaping has become a huge, huge issue among teens today. And we've noticed it at the high school. We deal with it almost every day. It's something that's very, very hard to prevent. And I think the best way to combat it is to inform students and educate the parents and educate everyone on the dangers of vaping and understand what these vape devices look like, how they operate, because the more knowledge you have, the better able you are to spot it at home and help us work to prevent it from happening. So with that, we're going to have a little mini presentation before we get started with the academic program by Mr. Guglieri, who deals with this all around the county and has some key information for us.
Thank you. Good evening. So my name is Frank Guglieri. I'm the Regional Safety Coordinator over at BOCES. I was in education for 18 years before I took this position. Just to give you a little background, I was a chemistry teacher. I was a chemistry professor, Vassar College, Mount St. Mary, Dutchess Community College. I worked in Wappinger Central School District. I have a background in chemistry. I have a background in forensics with work in toxicology. And on top of that, I've done a lot of work with vaping over the past 10 months that I've been in this position. So my goal here tonight is just to give you a little bit of information and try to combat a lot of the false information that's out there, so at least you're a little bit more prepared in really what, again, is this next level of war we're going on to. You know, it was cigarettes for a long time, and then this is the new one. And I'll explain why in a little bit. So vaping, just so you're aware, the idea of smoking is you take a cigarette, you light a cigarette up, and you're inhaling the smoke from the cigarette. The action that's going on there is combustion. You're burning the chemicals, and the chemicals are reacting with oxygen, and you're inhaling those chemicals. They're solid particles. They're settling in your lungs, okay? I had a lot of experience with smoking growing up. My father smoked 5 packs a day. Now, if I was your kid, you might smoke 5 packs a day, so you can't, don't judge him just yet. But that's what he was smoking before he stopped because he had his heart attack. Yeah, 5 packs a day. He was smoking them morning, noon, and night, and it was one of the craziest things. So, it was something that I always hated growing up, and I remember, seeing all this stuff with smoking. I did, again, toxicological work in college and after college on smoking just to see the effects because I was seeing it every day. One of the interesting things, in the past 10 years, we've seen smoking dip. Okay, everything that's out there, the taxes, those commercials that you see all the time. Everybody saw the commercial with the guy that was using the microphone in his throat, right? The emphysema, all those things. Smoking cigarettes has dipped. What's interesting is people using tobacco products are still on the rise. And the reason why they're still on the rise is because of vaping. Okay, that was Big Tobacco's ace in the hole. Okay, just so you know, vaping has been around. Anybody know how long vaping's been around? You could just shout it out. Close, 60. Almost 60 years vaping has been around for, but people didn't realize it. And it's the same thing that we see in the drug industry, where when drugs become quote-unquote illegal and it's very hard to import them and things like that, they go back in the books and they see what else was found years ago, and they bring that out, and that they have a little time to use those drugs until they become quote-unquote illegal. Well, this is what happened with vaping and smoking. Smoking became the pariah of this industry, so what they did is they went back in the books and they found this idea that an e-cigarette, okay, can be considered not a cigarette, quote unquote, and still deliver the nicotine and all the chemicals they want to deliver to you. So again, it's been around since about 60 years, okay, and what you're doing with vaping is you're not combusting the chemicals. You're not taking them and burning them. What you're doing is you're heating them up to turn them into a vapor. So much like you take water and you boil water and it turns into the vapor, you're doing the same thing with those liquid chemicals. They try to tout it as being safe. Oh, well, you're just inhaling water. And that's what one of the original e-cigarettes were. It was to fix the oral fixation that people had, and they were just heating up water and sucking in and blowing out water vapor. Not so anymore. Okay, there are 4 main chemicals, and we'll talk about them a little bit, that they use in vaping products. And again, part of the point of this presentation to educate you is to show you what those chemicals are. But anyway, what you're doing when you're vaping is you're taking in this vapor and you're inhaling it into your lungs just like a cigarette, and you're blowing it back out. Any device that is really not a cigarette but that is delivering nicotine is called an END. Electronic nicotine delivery system. you see two kinds. On your left, you see a bunch of vaping devices. On your right, you see what's called a juuling device. Right now, juuling is one of the most popular things for the college-age kids. Vaping is popular with the rock stars and all of them. And that's part of the problem, because what you're seeing is a lot of false information out there. About a week ago, 3 scientists who were hired to talk about the dangers of vaping and to research the dangers of vaping were found to be on the payroll of the vaping company. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like, you really can't. So it's things to be aware of when you see these articles. Vaping's not as bad, or vaping is a good alternative, or anything like that. If you're a heavy smoker and you are probably going to have a heart attack because you're smoking all these cigarettes, yes, vaping is a better alternative, but it's not the alternative, and that's what people don't understand. So when you smoke cigarettes, I believe you're 3 times as likely than a normal, healthy person to have a heart attack. When you vape, and this just came out a few weeks ago, you're twice as likely. Not good, okay? Same thing with bronchitis. I believe something like 3 or 4 times. If you're a smoker, you're at 3 or 4 times as likely to get bronchitis. Vaping is usually 1 underneath whatever it is for smoking. So if it's 5, for vaping it's 4. That's what we tend to see in the current research. The problem with the research is it's brand new, right? So, everybody here has heard that, what's the old adage? History repeats itself. Right? It's not true. History doesn't repeat itself. And I'm sorry for being so blunt, but it's the idiots that repeat history. Right? That's what happens. We know smoking is bad, right? I think everybody in here knows smoke. Whether you're a smoker or not, you know it's bad. My father knew it was bad. Every cigarette he smoked, he knew smoking was bad. He just couldn't stop. He was of that generation. And I think a lot of you in here can relate to that generation. Okay? The chemicals that are there are poisonous. They should not be in your system. And guess what we're finding out now? And again, the past couple of months, what did we find out? That the same chemicals that were in cigarettes are in vaping. Okay? They're noticing that they're finding a lot of the poisonous metals, lead, cadmium, all those things that you can't have in paint anymore or anything else. They're in cigarettes and they're in the vaping chemicals. So there's 3 parts to any typical vape device that you need to be aware of. And they're very sleek. And I have some here. If you have a few minutes at the end or whatever it is, you want to take a look at it, that's great. So you can see, again, what we're up against. The vaping devices look like pens. They're very sleek, very small. You have a mouthpiece, you have a heating element, and you have a cartridge. Okay, the Juuls are the same thing. They're even smaller than that. And then you have the vape juice. And in this case, they're showing you the nicotine here. Vape juice has 4 parts. I said it a little while ago. The 4 parts are the nicotine, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and then you can add a flavor. And that's the danger for people in the middle school, high school age. And that's where they're getting people hooked into the idea of vaping. Because even if you don't put nicotine in, which you don't have to do, okay, what you can do is you can give it a flavor. There's flavors like cheesecake, pina colada, pink lemonade, apple pie. Every time I do this presentation, I start to get hungry because it's all these delicious food flavors that are going to suck people in. Okay, and it's the same thing that, again, with anybody, right? It's that attractiveness, right? People's first cigarette was disgusting, and then people kind of fought through it. Not so with the vaping. The vaping has a good flavor to it, and that's what hooks the people. Even more so dangerous than that, when people are using these types of liquids and they leave it out, there's actually a lot of poison control calls because young children, toddlers, they smell the sweet smell and they're attracted to it and they're ingesting these chemicals. Okay, so we have poison control calls on top of everything else. The other problem with vaping is we can't control the nicotine that's in there. You can do whatever you want. A cartridge about this size, it's about 3/4 of an inch, holds the equivalent nicotine to a pack of cigarettes. What people are finding, especially people that are heavy smokers, when they try to switch to vaping, and these are heavy smokers, these are not I'm smoking a cigarette a day or whatever it might be, this is I'm smoking a pack, 2 packs a day. What they find when they start vaping is they get sick because they ingest the same amount of nicotine that they would have ingested over a whole day in a sitting. The other thing that they find is that when they switch to vaping is it doesn't turn them off Because in the past, if people smoked and their spouse didn't smoke, where did they have to go smoke? Outside, right? Outside, in the car, you know. My father sometimes used to hide in the shed, long story. But anyway, he would do those kinds of things, right? Now, with the smoking and the vaping, right, when you vape, there's really no scent attached to it. So you're inhaling that nicotine and nobody's really, it's not offensive to everybody. So you can do it in public and places like that. I'm not saying it's legal to do it, I'm just saying you can do it, okay? And that's what happens, and that's where the difficulty for the schools are, because they're trying to protect your kids, and they're trying to find out and who's doing it here and there in the bathrooms and the hallways, and it's a very fleeting type of thing. Becomes very, very difficult, and this is where the parents really can help support the schools, and the schools can help support the parents. But if you notice here, right, you could see the different amount of nicotine that can be put in a vape, and people can customize whatever they want to customize. I've seen Harry Potter vapes, okay? Who's starting on Harry Potter? 5th graders, 4th graders, whatever it might be. They see those types of things, they're out there, okay? The nicotine. Again, same type of thing. There are calls to the Poison Control Center because a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old ingested the nicotine liquid, which obviously is a poison. Now, on top of that, what can you do with vapes? You can also use the liquefied marijuana, okay? And that's out there as well. The medical marijuana, the legalization of marijuana, obviously it's not happening in New York just yet, but if you noticed in the news, right, we're starting to open dispensaries and things along those lines. It's only a matter of time. Okay, so on top of that, you can add other things to the vape juice, and that's what we're also seeing. Okay? When it comes to the adolescent anatomy and the adolescent physiology and even the adolescent brain, everything is still developing. So if we introduce some foreign substance, some foreign chemical, we are going to cause long-lasting effects, and the effects that we don't even know about, especially when it comes to vaping, because vaping is quote-unquote new out there. Couple of things to be aware of, okay? These are just some terms that are out there. Throat hits, mods, drips, analogs, and cloud chasers. Part of the subculture that goes along with vaping. Okay, what people do is, because we are a culture of excess, and everybody has to just admit that, okay, one of the things that they will do is they will take the vape and they will modify the vape, which is another dangerous thing. And they almost overclock it so they can get a higher temperature out of the battery. Okay? When things overheat, bad things happen for a lot of reasons. One, you're taking the chemicals, which should be harmless, quote unquote, at a certain temperature, and you're overheating them, and there's something that happens called toxic transformation, where those chemicals change into bad things, worse things for you, again, that people are inhaling. When it comes to the throat hit, what the kids are looking for is the burn on their throat. Okay? Again, not a good thing. I don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a doctor to understand that if they're burning their throat, it's probably a bad thing. What they're also finding with the vaping, with the youth especially, is that because their bodies are still developing, they're starting to develop open sores in their mouth, on their tongue, and in their throat, and those sores are taking longer to heal because of the toxic chemicals that are now in their body, their bloodstream, and everything else. Mods are things that people can do to the vape to change it. So what they can do is they can overclock it, they can change the temperature, they can stop the fail-safes, stop the shutoff. Some vapes will only allow you to take, enough hits to make a cigarette. So what people are doing is they're shutting that off so they can take as much as they want because they just feel like they want a better high, so to speak. Dripping, what they have, if we go back just really quick, so if you look at the heating element, basically what the heating element, remember those old halogen lamps from about 20 years ago that had the coil in that got really hot, that caused a lot of fires? That's basically what that is. It's a coil that heats up. So what people are doing is they're taking the oil, instead of putting the oil in the cartridge, what they're doing is they're dripping it right onto that coil to get more smoke and a better, hotter throat hit out of it. Analogs are what people are calling cigalikes, okay? They're just basically cigarette lookalikes that you could smoke tobacco or other certain things out of that. You could put juice in there. You can do a bunch of different things. And lastly, cloud chasers are these people on the internet and everywhere that are doing smoke tricks. Again, another way to entice the youth to do it, okay? It's a multifaceted battle that we're fighting. So is it a good alternative to smoking? What we found is that people that smoke, that try to transition to vaping, most of them fail and go back to smoking. Okay? There is a slight increase to people who have quit, and that's what everybody's hanging on. Oh, it's a great alternative to smoking. No, it's not an alternative to smoking. If you're smoking and you're trying to quit, this is something that you could try, along with Nicorette gum, along with the patch, and all that type of stuff. But the incident of people quitting after they get to vaping is very low. I want to say it's somewhere between 10 and 20%. Okay? It's proven to be a gateway with the youth. Okay, that they're getting them to smoke. What they found, I think, is the last study that I looked at was that, they have a certain number of people at, in 8th grade that are willing to try cigarettes. What they found is that number was 4 times, if they vaped, they were 4 times as likely to try a cigarette. Okay, getting started at a younger age. Elevated toxicology in the bloodstream. We talked about the heavy metals and all those, but also the same type of things that are in cigarettes. The formaldehyde that's in cigarettes are in vape. There's a couple other things in there, and off the top of my head I can't remember, but just suffice it to say there's a lot of chemicals. Smoker's cough, they're also seeing bronchitis, pneumonia developing in teens. What they're seeing is they're developing that hacking cough, an increased amount of phlegm, not to be disgusting, but it is what it is, right? So they're starting to develop these things. That same hack that you hear in a 50-year-old person who's been smoking for 20 years is developing in about a year to 2 years in the teenagers. Wounds that won't heal, transformation I talked about. Last thing I want to talk about, because I don't want to, down your whole night, because it's a great presentation they got coming up. But lastly is the mechanical hazards, okay? And these are underreported because they are using these batteries and the chargers and those types of things, okay? These batteries, I heard you. These batteries are catching fire, and that's the big thing. And, people say that, oh, well, it was only 50 fires last year or something like that. That's only the fires that are reported. You have to remember, I worked in a high school, right? My last 3 years in a high school, I know of, my first year, there were 2 kids that had the vape explode. I knew them because they were in my class. Okay? The next year it was 3, and the next year it was 4. Very easy to remember. But it was increasing. It was not going down. And they admitted, I was teaching seniors, and they admitted, oh yeah, I clocked it up. I did this. I did that. They did things to change things because, again, especially, me, when I was an 18-year-old boy, right, I wasn't thinking things through. At a 39-year-old boy, I don't think things through sometimes, right? But back then, you just do things to try things. Somebody said something, you see something on the internet, you try stuff out, right? And that's what happens. We've had kids that burn their tongues, burn their faces, burn their hands because of those types of things, okay? Last year, we had a situation in Westchester where somebody left a vape in overnight and it burned through 5 condo apartments. And they went in and investigated, and the cause was that. Because what's happening is kids don't have a lot of money, so they're buying the cheaper versions that use cheaper batteries that are not quality tested. But I will say this, even the good batteries, if you're overclocking them, that can happen. I know it was a lot in a short period of time. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer? I have a fact sheet here for you that we'll make available to you. Basically, a fact sheet's just on, 1 in 5 of this, that type of stuff. Goes over some of the terms I talked about today. The information that's out there is ever evolving. Okay, like I said, last week, another 2 or 3 studies came out. There's going to be more and more on this topic, and I'm telling you, it's not going to be good. At no point will they say, you know what, vaping's great for you, you guys should start. I'm telling you. And if they say that, they're lying to you. Okay, I mean, I have no other way to say it. I remember when I was in high school, right, I would do a lot of stupid things, but one of the things that I was so thankful for me, was sports and that ability, and I see people, that were, again, my father's age, they were heavy smokers, they weren't able to walk upstairs, they weren't able to do those things, and that's one thing I was always thankful for, were my lungs and being able to run and be a kid, to be honest with you, and even, now at my age, to be able to go out and play football and to do those things. We're seeing kids that are developing popcorn lung, right? When was the last time you heard popcorn lung? It was probably when you guys were young, right? That's what was coming out, okay? Because there was a lot of problems with chemicals, and popcorn lung came from bad popcorn butter. That's basically the chemicals that were used at people that were working in the factories. That's where it came from. Outlawed like 20 years ago, but again, we're seeing those same effects in the youth of today. So does anybody have any questions? Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Turn it back over.